The gold coins cascaded like metallic rain, as Olivia Parker's trembling fingers lost their grip on the leather satchel. It was the third time this week she'd counted her ill-gotten fortune, hidden beneath the floorboards of her modest cabin on the outskirts of Rawlins, Wyoming. The year was 1876, and the 23-year-old woman had become the territory's most successful thief, though no one would have suspected the demure seamstress with auburn hair and innocent green eyes. Sunlight streamed through the cabin's lone window as she gathered the scattered coins, her heart racing at every distant sound. The Wells Fargo stagecoach robbery 6 months ago had yielded more than she'd ever dreamed possible. $15,000 in newly minted gold coins, enough to start a new life far from Wyoming territory, far from the painful memories that haunted her each night. Olivia carefully replaced the loose floorboard and smoothed her simple blue cotton dress. She had clients waiting at her shop in town, respectable folks who believed her to be nothing more than a talented seamstress with a gift for fine stitching. Her double life had served her well these past 3 years. By day, she hemmed dresses and repaired suit jackets. By night, she planned her heists with meticulous attention to detail. The walk into Rawlins took 15 minutes, just enough time for her to compose herself and slip into the persona of Miss Parker, the hard-working seamstress. The town had grown considerably since the Union Pacific Railroad had established a division point here in 1868. Nearly 2,000 souls now called Rawlins home, with new buildings sprouting up along the dusty Main Street each month. "Good morning, Miss Parker," called Mr. Hendrickson from the general store as she passed. "Fine day, is it not?" "Indeed it is, sir," she replied with a practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. "The spring air feels especially refreshing today." She continued toward her small shop nestled between the land office and telegraph station. As she approached, she noticed an unfamiliar horse hitched outside a magnificent black stallion with a white star on its forehead. Something about the animal made her pause, a flicker of unease passing through her. The bell above her door jingled as she entered, and her breath caught in her throat. A man stood by the window, his broad shoulders outlined by the morning sun. He turned at the sound, and Olivia found herself staring into the most penetrating blue eyes she'd ever seen. "Miss Parker, I presume?" His voice was deep, with the slight drawl of a man who'd spent considerable time in Texas. "Yes, that's right." She moved behind her counter, placing a physical barrier between them. "How may I help you, Mr. Jameson, Flynn Jameson?" He removed his hat, revealing thick, dark hair with a slight wave. He appeared to be in his late 20s with a face weathered by sun and wind. "I'm in need of some repairs to my riding coat. Buttons come loose and there's a tear along the seam." Olivia nodded, trying to ignore the inexplicable tension that filled the room. "I can certainly help with that. Do you have the coat with you?" He produced a well-worn leather duster from a saddlebag he'd brought in. As she took it from him, their fingers brushed momentarily. The brief contact sent an unexpected jolt through her. "When might it be ready, Miss Parker?" Flynn asked, his gaze never leaving her face. "Tomorrow afternoon should be sufficient. The work isn't extensive." She wrote up a receipt, acutely aware of his steady gaze. "Much obliged." He placed a silver dollar on the counter. "I'll return tomorrow, then." As he turned to leave, he paused at the door. "By the way, you wouldn't happen to know anything about a stagecoach robbery outside of Cheyenne last year, would you? They say the thief made off with quite a fortune in gold." The pencil in Olivia's hand snapped. I don't follow such news, Mr. Jameson." "Robberies and outlaws aren't proper conversation for a ladies' establishment." A smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Of course. My apologies, Miss Parker. Until tomorrow." The door closed behind him, and Olivia gripped the counter to steady herself. Who was this man? A lawman? A bounty hunter? Or just a cowboy with an unfortunate curiosity about local crimes? She forced herself to breathe normally as Mrs. Willoughby entered with 2 dresses needing alterations. The day continued with its usual rhythm of customers and sewing, but Flynn Jameson's piercing blue eyes haunted her thoughts. That evening, Olivia closed shop earlier than usual and hurried back to her cabin. She needed to check on the gold, perhaps move it to a different hiding place. Flynn Jameson's arrival in Rawlins couldn't be coincidence. 3 years of successful robberies had made her cautious, almost paranoid. She was so preoccupied with her thoughts that she failed to notice the rider following at a distance, his horse's hooves muffled by the soft spring earth. Back at her cabin, Olivia lit a lamp and quickly removed the floorboard, relief washing over her at the sight of the leather satchels still securely in place. She lifted one out, running her fingers over the cool metal coins inside. This particular bag contained the oldest of her stolen fortune, taken from a bank in Laramie when she'd first begun her life of crime. "That's quite a nest egg you've got there, Miss Parker." The deep voice from the doorway nearly stopped her heart. Flynn Jameson leaned against the doorframe, his tall frame blocking the only exit. In one hand he held his hat, in the other a U.S. Marshal's badge gleamed in the lamplight. "How did you," she began, instinctively backing away, "find you, follow you?" "Figure out that the respectable seamstress of Rawlins is actually the most elusive thief in the Wyoming territory." He stepped into the cabin, closing the door behind him. "I've been tracking you for almost a year, Miss Parker, or should I call you the ghost as the newspapers have named you?" Olivia's mind raced through possible escapes, but the marshal blocked the only door, and the cabin's single window was too small for a quick exit. Her hand inched toward the knife hidden in the folds of her skirt. "I wouldn't," Flynn said quietly, nodding toward her hand. "I'm not here to harm you, but I am here to bring you to justice." "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You can't take me in. I'm afraid I must." 3 banks, 2 stagecoaches, and a payroll office, all robbed without a single witness able to provide a useful description. He took another step into the room. "You've led us on quite a chase, Miss Parker." Something in his tone made her look up sharply. Was that respect she heard? Admiration, even? "How did you know it was me?" she asked, her hand still near the hidden knife. "The stitching," he replied simply. "At each robbery, something was left behind: a handkerchief at the bank in Laramie, a glove at the Wells Fargo office. Small things, easily overlooked. But they all had the same distinctive stitching pattern. I showed samples to seamstresses in 5 different towns before one recognized the work as possibly belonging to Olivia Parker of Rawlins." Olivia closed her eyes briefly. Such a small detail, such a monumental mistake. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Flynn gestured to the open floorboards and the gold. "First, you're going to show me everything. Then we're going to talk about returning it. Returning it, all of it." The thought made her physically ill. "I can't, I won't." "Miss Parker, you're facing 20 years in territorial prison at minimum. That's if they don't decide to make an example of you with a hanging." His voice remained calm, matter of fact. "However, if all the stolen money were to be returned, with your assistance in explaining how you managed these heists, well, the courts can sometimes be lenient with those who cooperate." She laughed bitterly. "Lenient? 5 years in prison instead of 20? No thank you, Marshal. I'll take my chances." Her fingers closed around the knife handle, her muscles tensing for action. Flynn sighed as if reading her intentions. "Before you do something you'll regret, at least tell me why. You're clearly intelligent, skilled." You could have made an honest living with those hands of yours. Why risk everything for stolen gold? The unexpected question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her why. They'd always been too busy condemning her family, judging them without understanding. "My father," she said softly. "He died in a mining accident 3 years ago. The company claimed he was drunk, that it was his own fault. They refused to pay what they owed him, what they owed our family." The words came faster now, years of pent-up rage finding release. "My mother died 2 months later from grief and the fever. My little brother followed that winter. I had nothing, no one. The law did nothing to help us." Flynn's expression remained unreadable. "So you decided to become the law yourself, take what you felt was owed." "I took what I needed to survive at first, then I discovered I was good at it." A hint of pride crept into her voice. "No one ever suspected a woman, especially not one who looked like me." "Until now," Flynn said quietly. "Until you," she corrected. Their eyes locked across the small cabin, an unspoken current passing between them that neither fully understood. For a moment, Olivia thought she saw something in his gaze, not just duty or determination, but a flicker of genuine interest, perhaps even understanding. "Miss Parker, Olivia," he said, his voice softening slightly. "I have a proposal for you." She raised an eyebrow, still wary but curious. "I'm listening." "Return the money, all of it. Help me understand how you accomplish these robberies so we can prevent others from using similar methods. In exchange, I'll speak to the judge on your behalf." "That's your proposal? Turn myself in and hope for mercy?" "No." Flynn took another step forward. "My proposal is that you help me return the money anonymously. The victims get their losses recovered, but your identity remains a secret." Olivia stared at him in disbelief. "Why would a U.S. Marshal offer such terms? It's your duty to arrest me." "My duty is to justice, not just the law, and sometimes those aren't the same thing." He glanced around the modest cabin. "I see no evidence that you've spent this fortune on yourself. Your shop is small, this cabin basic. Where was the money going?" The question struck at the heart of her secret. For a long moment, she considered lying, but something in Flynn's direct gaze compelled honesty. "Come with me," she said finally. Olivia led Flynn outside and around to the back of the cabin, where a small path disappeared into the woods. They walked in silence for nearly 10 minutes before reaching a clearing where a larger cabin stood. Unlike her simple dwelling, this structure was well built, with glass windows and a proper porch. Light spilled from inside, and the sounds of children's laughter drifted through the evening air. Flynn looked at her questioningly. "After my family died, I discovered others in similar circumstances, widows of miners, children orphaned by company accidents, families left destitute when their breadwinners were killed, and the mining companies refused compensation." She gestured toward the cabin. "I built this place for them. There are 12 children and 5 women living here now. The gold pays for food, clothing, medicine, education." Flynn stood silently, absorbing this unexpected revelation. Inside the cabin, a woman began singing a lullaby, her voice sweet and clear in the gathering darkness. "You're telling me you robbed banks and stage coaches to support orphans and widows?" he asked finally. "I'm not claiming to be a saint, Marshal Jameson. I wanted revenge at first. I wanted to hurt the people and institutions that had hurt my family." Olivia's voice was steady now, her green eyes meeting his without flinching. "But then I met Martha, whose husband died in the same accident as my father. She had 3 small children and nowhere to go. After that came Rebecca and her daughter, then the Williams children." Flynn ran a hand through his hair, his expression troubled. "This complicates things." "Life is complicated, Marshal." She turned to face him fully. "What will you do now? Arrest me and send these children back to the streets?" Or would you prefer they return to the company housing where the foremen expect favors from the widows who can't pay their rent? The harshness of frontier reality hung between them, undeniable and brutal. Flynn had seen enough in his years as a lawman to know her words weren't exaggerated. "There must be another way," he said finally, "a legal way to help these people without resorting to theft." "I tried that path first," Olivia replied. "I wrote letters to newspapers, to politicians, to the territorial governor. I appealed to churches and charities. Do you know what happened? Nothing. No one cared about a few dead miners and their families. They stood in silence as the night deepened around them, the weight of impossible choices pressing down on both. Finally, Flynn spoke. "Show me the rest of the gold, all of it." Back at her cabin, Olivia revealed 3 more hiding places beneath the hearthstones, inside a hollow bedpost, behind a false wall in her small pantry. All told, nearly $40,000 in gold coins and banknotes lay spread across her table. "This is everything?" Flynn asked, his professional demeanor returning as he cataloged the stolen money. "Everything except what I've already spent on the women and children," she confirmed. Flynn nodded thoughtfully. "Here's what's going to happen, Miss Parker. Tomorrow, you and I will begin returning this money, starting with the most recent robbery, the Wells Fargo office. You'll help me understand exactly how you managed to override their security measures. And then you'll arrest me," she asked bluntly. "No." His answer surprised them both. "Then we'll move on to the next victim and the next, until everything that can be returned has been." Olivia eyed him suspiciously. "Why would you do this? You're risking your badge. Perhaps I believe there's more than one way to uphold justice." His blue eyes held hers. "Or perhaps I'm not ready to see those children lose another person who cares for them." The tension between them shifted, something unspoken passing through the space that separated them. Olivia felt her heart beat faster, aware that this man was offering her something she hadn't dared hope for: a chance at redemption, a path forward that didn't end in prison or the gallows. "I don't trust you," she said honestly. "I wouldn't expect you to," he replied with equal frankness. "But I'm asking you to work with me anyway, for those children if nothing else." Olivia considered his words, weighing her limited options. Finally, she nodded. "All right, Marshal Jameson, we'll do this your way for now." "Flynn," he corrected. "If we're going to be partners in this unusual arrangement, you might as well use my given name." "Flynn," she repeated, testing the name on her lips. "And I suppose you'll call me Olivia, if you'll permit it." A hint of a smile softened his features. That night, Flynn insisted on keeping watch over both Olivia and the recovered fortune. He made a pallet near the door while she took the small bed in the corner, neither of them sleeping much as dawn approached. The next morning brought a new reality as they began the complicated process of anonymous restitution. Flynn had devised a plan that would protect Olivia's identity while ensuring the stolen money was returned to its rightful owners. "I'll present myself as a private investigator hired by anonymous clients who wish to return funds they received through questionable means," he explained over a simple breakfast of coffee and cornbread. "It's not uncommon for those who have profited from others' crimes to develop a conscience later. And the banks and stagecoach companies will simply accept this story?" Olivia asked skeptically. "They'll accept their money back without too many questions," Flynn replied, "especially when a U.S. Marshal vouches for the arrangement. Won't your superiors wonder what you're doing?" Flynn's expression darkened slightly. "I've been given considerable latitude in this investigation. As long as the stolen property is recovered, the details are mine to manage." They set out for Cheyenne that afternoon, the gold securely packed in Flynn's saddlebags. Olivia rode beside him on her own horse, a chestnut mare that had been her companion for years. The journey would take several days, giving them ample time to refine their plan and to learn more about each other. As they made camp the first evening, Olivia found herself studying Flynn as he tended the fire. His movements were efficient, his hands strong yet surprisingly gentle as they arranged kindling and struck sparks from flint. Those same hands, she realized, could have placed her in handcuffs yesterday. Instead, they were helping to build a fire to keep her warm. "You're staring, Miss Parker," Flynn said without looking up. "I'm trying to understand you," she admitted. "No lawman I've ever encountered would offer the arrangement you've proposed." Flynn sat back on his heels, the fire crackling to life before him. "Perhaps you've encountered the wrong lawmen. Or perhaps you're not like other lawmen," he smiled faintly. "My father was a judge in Boston. He taught me that justice isn't always served by strict adherence to written law. Sometimes justice requires wisdom and compassion alongside authority." "Is that why you became a marshal? To dispense this wiser justice?" There was no mockery in her tone, only genuine curiosity. Flynn stared into the flames for a long moment. "I became a marshal because I wanted to help people who couldn't help themselves. I wanted to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them." He looked up, meeting her gaze across the fire. "Not so different from your motivations, it seems, though our methods diverged considerably." Olivia considered this. "We're not as different as one might think, then." "Perhaps not in our aims," he agreed, "though I still maintain robbery isn't the solution to injustice." "What is the solution, then?" she challenged. "When the law fails those it's meant to protect, when corporations and wealthy men can buy their way out of responsibility. The solution is changing the system from within, fighting for better laws, better enforcement." His expression was earnest, passionate. "It's slower than taking justice into your own hands, I'll grant you that. But lasting change requires persistence, not just rebellion." Their conversation continued long into the night, philosophical debates giving way to more personal revelations as the fire burned low. Flynn spoke of his childhood in Boston, his education at Harvard, and his decision to head west against his family's wishes. Olivia shared stories of her own upbringing, the daughter of an immigrant miner who taught her to read from borrowed books by lamplight. By the time they reached Cheyenne 3 days later, something had shifted between them. The wary suspicion had transformed into a tentative respect, perhaps even the beginnings of friendship. They worked together seamlessly, as Flynn arranged meetings with bank managers and company representatives, presenting the recovered funds as the result of his investigation while Olivia observed from a distance, sometimes disguised as his assistant. To Olivia's surprise, Flynn's plan worked. The victims were so pleased to recover their losses that few questions were asked about the mysterious benefactors who had funded the investigation. Each successful return strengthened her trust in the marshal, though she remained vigilant for any sign of betrayal. After 2 weeks of traveling between Cheyenne, Laramie, and smaller settlements, they had returned nearly $30,000. The remaining funds had already been spent on the women and children. Olivia had taken under her protection, a fact that troubled Flynn, though he never suggested she try to reclaim those expenditures. As they rode back toward Rawlins, a comfortable silence between them, Olivia found herself at a crossroads. The gold was gone, returned to its owners. Her secret identity remained intact thanks to Flynn's discretion. But what came next? Could she simply return to her life as a seamstress, abandoning the women and children who depended on her? "What are you thinking?" Flynn asked, breaking into her thoughts as they made camp for the night. "I'm wondering what happens now," she admitted. The gold is gone. How am I supposed to support Martha and the others? Flynn busied himself with unsaddling his horse. I've been giving that some thought myself. And I think I might have a solution, though it depends entirely on your willingness to trust me a little further. He turned to face her, his expression serious. There's a mining company, Blackstone Minerals, that's been acquiring properties throughout the territory. The owner, Harrison Blackstone, is an old acquaintance of my father's. Olivia stiffened. Blackstone bought out my father's mine after the accident. They're the ones who refused compensation to the families. I know, Flynn said quietly, and I think it's time they were held accountable legally. How? They own the judges in this territory, not all of them. Flynn's blue eyes gleamed with determination. Judge Carlton in Cheyenne is an honest man. With proper evidence and witness testimony, he would rule against even Blackstone. Olivia shook her head skeptically. What evidence? What witnesses? The company destroyed the accident records, and no miner still employed by Blackstone would testify against them for fear of losing their job or worse. That's where you come in. Flynn moved closer, his voice low and intense. During your robberies, did you ever take any documents? Papers, ledgers, anything that might contain evidence of the company's negligence? The question brought Olivia up short. During her robbery of the Blackstone Company office in Laramie, she had indeed taken more than money. In her rage, she'd emptied the manager's safe completely, including several leather-bound ledgers she'd assumed contained financial records. I took some books from their Laramie office, she admitted. I never looked through them. I was only interested in the cash box. Flynn's face lit up with hope. Where are they now? Hidden with some other items I kept. Not at my cabin, I have a cache in the hills. We need to examine those ledgers. If they contain what I think they might, records of safety violations, falsified inspection reports, bribes to officials, we could build a case against Blackstone that even their money couldn't overcome. Olivia considered his words, a dangerous hope kindling within her. And if we succeed? What would that mean for the families? It would mean proper compensation, finally. It would mean the women and children you've been supporting could have legitimate means to care for themselves. Flynn's voice grew softer. It would mean you wouldn't need to risk your life stealing anymore. The possibility was almost too tantalizing to believe. Why would you do this? You've already gone far beyond your duty by not arresting me. Flynn was quiet for a long moment, his gaze dropping to the ground between them. When he looked up again, something in his expression made Olivia's heart beat faster. Perhaps I've developed a vested interest in your future, Miss Parker. The admission hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither was quite ready to voice. Olivia found herself unable to look away from him, aware of a tension that had nothing to do with their complicated circumstances. Flynn, she said softly, using his given name with new meaning. He took a step closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes. Olivia. The moment stretched between them, fragile and charged with possibility. Then, with a gentleness that belied his strength, Flynn reached up to touch her cheek. Olivia closed her eyes, leaning slightly into his palm. "This is unwise," she whispered, even as her body betrayed her words by moving closer to his. "Completely," he agreed, his voice rough with emotion. When his lips finally met hers, the kiss was tentative at first, a question rather than a demand. Olivia answered by winding her arms around his neck, pressing herself closer as the kiss deepened into something hungry and honest. They broke apart breathless, both startled by the intensity of their connection. Flynn rested his forehead against hers, his hand steady on her waist. "We should probably focus on the task at hand," he said, though his reluctance was evident in his tone. Olivia nodded, stepping back slightly. The ledgers. Yes, but something fundamental had changed between them. As they continued their journey back to Rawlins, planning their legal strategy against Blackstone Minerals, their conversation flowed more easily, punctuated by lingering glances and brief touches that spoke of deeper feelings neither was ready to fully acknowledge. Upon reaching Rawlins, Olivia led Flynn to her hidden cache in the hills east of town. Beneath a nondescript boulder, she had dug a small chamber lined with oilcloth to protect its contents from moisture. Inside were various items she'd kept from her robberies not for their monetary value, but for sentimental or strategic reasons. Among them were 3 leather-bound ledgers with the Blackstone Company seal embossed on their covers. Flynn's hands shook slightly as he opened the first one, his eyes scanning the meticulous entries. "This is exactly what we need," he breathed, his expression a mixture of triumph and outrage as he turned pages. "Look here, they recorded the reduced expenditure on support beams in your father's mine, noting it as acceptable risk management despite inspector warnings." Olivia peered over his shoulder, her chest tight with vindication and grief. "And here payments to the territorial inspector to expedite favorable reports. They knew the mine was dangerous." They spent the next 3 days poring over the ledgers, building a comprehensive case against Blackstone Minerals. Flynn drafted legal documents while Olivia compiled a list of potential witnesses, former miners who had left the company's employ, and might be willing to testify now that they had evidence to support their claims. During this time, they worked from Olivia's cabin, their proximity only intensifying the growing attraction between them. Each evening, Flynn would reluctantly depart for the hotel in town, both of them aware that propriety demanded distance even as their hearts pulled them closer together. On the 4th day, as they prepared to take their evidence to Judge Carlton in Cheyenne, disaster struck. Flynn returned from the telegraph office with a grim expression. "What's wrong?" Olivia asked, immediately alert to his tension. "Someone's been asking questions about us in Laramie and Cheyenne, a private investigator hired by Blackstone Minerals." He handed her the telegram. "They're connecting the return of the stolen money with my investigation into the mining accidents." Olivia read the message quickly, her face paling. "Do they know about me?" "Not yet, but they're getting closer. My contacts in Cheyenne say Blackstone's men are offering substantial rewards for information about the ghost and anyone helping them. We need to move quickly then, get the evidence to Judge Carlton before Blackstone can interfere." Flynn nodded, but his expression remained troubled. "There's more. The investigator they've hired, James Wilcox, he's dangerous, a former Pinkerton who was dismissed for excessive violence. He doesn't just find people, he eliminates problems." The implications were clear. Blackstone wasn't just seeking information. They were actively trying to prevent their misdeeds from coming to light by any means necessary. "We leave for Cheyenne tonight," Flynn decided. "Under cover of darkness, we'll avoid the main roads and telegraph stations." "What about Martha and the children?" Olivia's voice tightened with concern. "I've arranged for Deputy Marshal Collins to keep watch over them without revealing why. He's a good man, someone I trust completely." They packed quickly, taking only essentials and the precious ledgers. As dusk fell, they slipped out of Rawlins, heading southeast toward Cheyenne on a seldom-used trail that Flynn knew from his years patrolling the territory. The journey was tense, both of them aware that discovery could mean not just the failure of their mission, but potentially their lives. They traveled by night when possible, making cold camps away from the trail and speaking in whispers even when alone. On the 3rd night, as they huddled beside a small, carefully screened fire, Olivia found herself studying Flynn's face in the flickering light. The past weeks had changed him, or perhaps just revealed aspects of his character she hadn't initially seen. The rigid lawman had given way to a man of principle and compassion, someone willing to risk his career and safety for justice. "What will you do after this is over?" she asked quietly. "Assuming we succeed against Blackstone." Flynn poked at the fire with a stick, considering. "I don't know. My actions haven't exactly followed martial protocol. I might not have a badge much longer. Do you regret it, not arresting me that night in my cabin?" He looked up, his blue eyes catching the firelight. Not for a moment. The simple declaration sent warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the fire. "Why?" Flynn set the stick aside and moved to sit beside her on the fallen log. "Because I found something more important than following the letter of the law. I found you." He reached for her hand, entwining his fingers with hers. Olivia felt her breath catch as he lifted their joined hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I never expected this," he continued softly. "When I set out to capture the ghost, I thought I was pursuing a hardened criminal. Instead, I found a woman trying to protect those who couldn't protect themselves, just as I had sworn to do as a marshal. And now," she whispered, "now I find myself hoping there might be a future for us when this is done. Something beyond fugitives and lawmen, beyond gold and restitution." His gaze held hers, vulnerable yet steady. "Is that something you might want too, Olivia?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Olivia felt tears prick her eyes, unexpected emotion welling up from a place she'd thought long closed off. "I haven't allowed myself to want things in a very long time," she admitted. "Wanting leads to hoping, and hope is dangerous when you're living the kind of life I've lived." "And now?" Flynn echoed her earlier question. Olivia leaned forward, closing the distance between them. "Now I find myself hoping too," she whispered against his lips before kissing him with all the longing she'd kept contained. Their embrace deepened, months of tension and growing attraction culminating in this moment of connection. Flynn's arms encircled her, drawing her closer as the world beyond their small camp faded into insignificance. Later, as they lay wrapped in blankets beneath the vast Wyoming sky, Olivia marveled at how completely her life had changed in the weeks since Flynn Jameson had walked into her shop. From feared thief to potential hero, from solitary survivor to a woman in love, the transformation seemed almost too profound to be real. "What are you thinking?" Flynn murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That I never imagined my life could change so completely," she answered honestly. "That I never thought I could feel this way about anyone, let alone a U.S. Marshal who was hunting me." He chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her ear where it rested on his chest. "Life has a way of surprising us, though I suspect neither of us is quite who we pretended to be at first." "No," she agreed. "You're not the rigid lawman, and I'm not just a thief." "You never were just a thief," Flynn corrected gently. "You were always more than that." They reached Cheyenne the following evening, approaching the city cautiously from the north to avoid any watchers Blackstone might have posted on the main roads. Flynn led them to a modest boarding house on the outskirts of town, run by a widow who owed him a favor from years past. Mrs. Holloway asked no questions about their late arrival or their desire for discretion, simply showing them to adjoining rooms and promising to send up hot water and a simple meal. "We'll go to Judge Carlton first thing in the morning," Flynn said once they were alone in Olivia's room. "He holds court early, before most of Blackstone's people would be watching." Olivia nodded, unpacking the precious ledgers and arranging them carefully. "Do you think he'll believe us? Act on this evidence?" Carlton's reputation for integrity is unimpeachable. If anyone will stand up to Blackstone, it's him. Flynn's confidence was reassuring, but we should be prepared for resistance, perhaps even danger. Blackstone won't surrender his empire without a fight. That night they slept fitfully, both acutely aware of the risks the morning would bring. At dawn, they dressed quickly, Flynn in his marshal's attire, complete with badge and sidearm, Olivia in a conservative dress that made her look like a proper legal assistant rather than a notorious thief. They reached the courthouse as the first light of day was breaking over Cheyenne. To their relief, Judge Carlton was indeed already in his chambers, reviewing cases for the day. Flynn's badge granted them immediate access, though the judge's eyebrows rose at their early arrival. "Marshal Jameson," Carlton greeted him, setting aside his papers. "This is an unexpected pleasure." "What brings you to my chambers at this hour?" "A matter of grave importance, Your Honor." Flynn gestured to Olivia. "This is Miss Parker. She has come into possession of evidence regarding serious wrongdoing by Blackstone Minerals Corporation, evidence that relates directly to several mining accidents over the past 5 years. Judge Carlton's expression sharpened with interest. He was an older man with silver hair and penetrating gray eyes that missed nothing. "Blackstone, you say? Harrison Blackstone's company?" "Yes, Your Honor," Olivia spoke up, her voice steady despite her nerves. "Evidence of negligence that led to multiple deaths, including my father's." The judge studied her for a moment, then nodded toward the ledgers she carried. "Show me what you've brought." For the next hour, they presented their case: the falsified safety reports, the bribes to inspectors, the internal memos acknowledging dangers while choosing profit over miners' lives. Judge Carlton listened intently, occasionally asking precise questions that revealed his quick grasp of the situation. "This is compelling evidence," he said finally, closing the last ledger. "Compelling and disturbing. If these records are authentic, and they appear to be, Blackstone has engaged in criminal negligence on a massive scale." "They are authentic, Your Honor," Flynn assured him. "I've verified the handwriting against known Blackstone Company documents." The judge nodded thoughtfully. "I can issue warrants today for company records, for testimony from key officials. But I should warn you both. Harrison Blackstone is a powerful man with connections throughout the territory. This will not be an easy fight." "We understand the risks, Your Honor," Olivia said firmly. "But these men and their families deserve justice." "Indeed they do, Miss Parker." Judge Carlton's gaze was appraising. "Though I find myself curious about how these particular ledgers came into your possession." Flynn stepped forward slightly. "That's a complicated matter, Your Honor, but one I take full responsibility for as the investigating officer." Understanding flickered in the judge's eyes. "I see. Perhaps some details are best left undiscussed at this juncture." He rose from behind his desk, a man of decision now that the evidence was before him. "Wait here. I'll draft the necessary warrants immediately and assign deputies to begin serving them before Blackstone gets wind of our actions." As the judge left the chamber, Olivia sagged slightly with relief. Flynn caught her elbow, steadying her. "He believed us," she whispered. "Carlton's a good man. One of the few truly incorruptible officials in the territory." Flynn's voice was equally low. "But this is just the beginning. Once Blackstone realizes what's happening, he'll fight back with everything he has." The judge returned within the hour, warrants in hand. "I've dispatched deputies to the Blackstone offices here in Cheyenne and sent telegrams to secure their records in Laramie and Rawlins as well. Marshal Jameson, I'd like you to personally lead the search of their main offices here." Flynn straightened, accepting the responsibility. "And Miss Parker?" I think it would be wise for the young lady to remain under court protection for the time being. I've arranged a room at my own home where she will be safe while we proceed." The judge's precaution proved wise. By midday, word of the raid on Blackstone's offices had spread throughout Cheyenne. By evening, Harrison Blackstone himself had arrived in town, bringing with him a team of expensive lawyers and several men whose hard eyes and concealed weapons suggested professions outside the law. For 3 tense days, Olivia remained in Judge Carlton's home while Flynn coordinated the investigation, collecting additional evidence and interviewing former Blackstone employees who, emboldened by the legal proceedings, began coming forward with their own stories of company malfeasance. On the 4th day, as the case against Blackstone grew stronger by the hour, Flynn arrived at the judge's home with alarming news. "James Wilcox has been seen in Cheyenne," he told Olivia, his expression grim, "and he's asking questions about a woman matching your description." Judge Carlton, who had been briefed on the danger Wilcox represented, made an immediate decision. "You can't stay here, Miss Parker. If Wilcox connects you to me, it could compromise the entire case." "Where should she go?" Flynn asked, tension evident in the set of his shoulders. "I have a hunting cabin in the Laramie Range," the judge offered. "Few people know of its existence. Miss Parker would be safe there while we complete the initial phases of this investigation." Olivia shook her head. "I can't hide while others fight this battle. These are my people Blackstone has harmed. This is my fight too." "It's not just about safety," Flynn explained gently. "If Blackstone's people can connect you directly to the ledgers, they might be able to challenge their admissibility in court. Your past activities could give their lawyers leverage to dismiss crucial evidence." The logic was sound, however frustrating. That night, Flynn escorted Olivia to Judge Carlton's remote cabin, a simple but comfortable structure nestled among pine trees in the foothills of the Laramie Range. "I'll return as soon as possible," Flynn promised as he prepared to leave her there. 3 days at most. By then, we should have enough corroborating evidence that the origin of the ledgers won't matter." Olivia watched him saddle his horse with mixed emotions. Their separation felt wrong after all they'd been through together, yet she understood the necessity. "Be careful," she said as he mounted. "Wilcox doesn't sound like a man who follows rules." "I've dealt with his kind before." Flynn's confidence was reassuring. He leaned down from the saddle to kiss her, a lingering embrace that held promises for their future. "Stay inside. Don't light fires during daylight. I'll be back before you know it." But Flynn didn't return in 3 days, or 4. As the 5th day dawned with no sign of him, Olivia's worry turned to dread. Something had gone wrong in Cheyenne, something serious enough to prevent Flynn from returning or sending word. On the 6th morning, unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, Olivia saddled the horse Flynn had left for her emergencies and headed toward Cheyenne. She traveled cautiously, avoiding the main roads and approaching the city from the north as they had done previously. The scene that greeted her was worse than she'd feared. A large crowd had gathered outside the courthouse, their angry voices carrying on the morning air. Signs denounced Judge Carlton and the baseless persecution of Harrison Blackstone, a man who brought jobs and prosperity to Wyoming. Many of the protesters wore Blackstone Company badges, miners and office workers, whose livelihoods depended on the very corporation being investigated. Olivia dismounted at a small livery on the outskirts of town, paying extra for the owner's discretion. Dressed simply and with her hair tucked under a bonnet, she made her way toward the courthouse, listening to conversations as she passed through the crowd. Judge was found with evidence tampered with. Marshal suspended pending investigation. Blackstone offering rewards for information. The fragments painted a disturbing picture. Somehow, Blackstone had managed to turn the tables, casting himself as the victim of a conspiracy rather than the perpetrator of crimes. Olivia slipped into a small cafe across from the courthouse, ordering coffee as she continued gathering information. The waitress, a cheerful woman named Betty, was all too happy to share the latest gossip. "It's a real mess, that's what it is," Betty confided, refilling Olivia's cup unasked. "Judge Carlton's been accused of evidence tampering him, of all people. And that handsome Marshal Jameson's been suspended, though some say he's actually under arrest in the jailhouse behind the marshal's office." Olivia's heart stuttered. Under arrest? On what charges? Conspiracy, abuse of authority, something about improper investigation procedures. Betty shrugged. "Blackstone's people are saying the marshal was working with some notorious criminal to frame the company. Can you imagine? All too easily," Olivia thought grimly. "And Judge Carlton? What's happened to him? Confined to his home while they investigate, from what I hear. His reputation's in tatters, poor man." Blackstone had moved quickly and effectively, using his influence to neutralize both Flynn and the judge before their case could proceed. But how had he known to target them specifically? How had he managed to turn a solid case with substantial evidence into a conspiracy? The answer came to her as she left the cafe. A familiar figure was emerging from the Blackstone Company offices across the street, Martha Williams, one of the widows Olivia had been supporting. Martha, who had access to Olivia's cabin, who knew about the ledgers, who had been present for some of Olivia and Flynn's planning discussions. Betrayal cut deep, though Olivia forced herself to consider Martha's position. With 5 children to feed and Blackstone controlling most employment in the region, what choice had she really had when threatened? The company would have offered security for her family in exchange for information, a bargain many desperate mothers would make. Olivia retreated to the livery, her mind racing as she formulated a plan. If Blackstone had turned their own evidence against them, she would need to find new leverage, something that couldn't be dismissed as a conspiracy. And she would need to free Flynn from jail before Blackstone's men could arrange a more permanent solution to the troublesome marshal. That night, she made her way to the rear of the marshal's office, where a small jailhouse held prisoners awaiting trial. The building was minimally guarded, just one deputy dozing at a desk near the front entrance. Olivia slipped in through a back window, skills honed during years of robberies serving her well as she navigated the darkened building. Flynn was in the last cell, seated on a narrow cot with his head in his hands. He looked up sharply at her approach, disbelief and then relief washing across his features. "Olivia," he whispered, moving to the bars, "you shouldn't be here, it's too dangerous." "So I've gathered," she replied quietly, examining the cell's lock. "What happened?" Flynn's expression darkened. "Blackstone happened. Somehow he learned about the ledgers about us. He's claiming the evidence was planted, that I conspired with a known criminal to frame his company for personal gain." "Martha Williams," Olivia confirmed. "I saw her coming out of the Blackstone offices today." Understanding and disappointment flickered across Flynn's face. "I should have been more careful about who knew our plans. We both should have." Olivia produced a set of slender metal tools from her pocket, the same ones she'd used to open bank vaults and locked cabinets during her career as the Ghost. The cell's lock was simple by comparison, yielding to her expertise within minutes. "Come on," she urged as the door swung open. "We need to leave town immediately." Flynn hesitated. "Running makes me look guilty. It could destroy any chance of reviving the case against Blackstone." "Staying could get you killed," Olivia countered. Blackstone has hired James Wilcox, remember? Men like that don't leave loose ends. The logic was undeniable. Together, they slipped out of the jailhouse and made their way to the livery where Olivia had left her horse. Flynn borrowed a mount from the marshal's own stable. It's technically mine for official business, he reasoned, and they rode out of Cheyenne under cover of darkness, heading west toward the relative safety of the mountains. As they made camp in a sheltered ravine miles from the city, Flynn's frustration boiled over. "We had him," he exclaimed, pacing beside their small fire. The evidence was solid. The judge was convinced. How did it all fall apart so quickly? "Money," Olivia said simply. "Money buys loyalty, silence, even evidence when necessary. We were naive to think Blackstone wouldn't use every resource at his disposal once he realized what we were doing." Flynn sank down beside her, his expression troubled. "So what now? We can't go back to Cheyenne. We can't return to Rawlins either. Blackstone's people will be watching for us there too." Olivia was quiet for a long moment, considering options. "There might be another way," she said finally. "One that doesn't rely on courts or legal procedures." Flynn looked at her sharply. "I hope you're not suggesting what I think you are. More theft won't solve this problem." "Not theft," she corrected. "Exposure. Blackstone can influence courts and officials, but he can't silence every newspaper in the territory or beyond." Understanding dawned in Flynn's eyes. "You want to take the story to the press. Not just any press. The New York Tribune has been publishing exposés on corporate malfeasance. Their editor, Horace Greeley, has made it his mission to hold powerful men accountable." Flynn considered this. It could work. The territorial papers might be afraid to cross Blackstone, but a New York publication wouldn't care about his influence in Wyoming. Exactly. And once the story breaks in New York, the local papers will have to follow it or lose credibility. Olivia's green eyes gleamed with determination. "We have copies of the ledgers. We have witness statements from the miners we interviewed. We have enough to make a compelling case in the court of public opinion, even if the legal system has been compromised." For the first time since his arrest, hope returned to Flynn's expression. "It's worth trying, but getting to New York won't be easy. Blackstone will have people watching trains and stagecoaches." "Then we don't take trains or stagecoaches," Olivia replied with a hint of her old confidence. "I didn't become the ghost by taking obvious routes." Their journey east was arduous, following back trails and remote passes to avoid detection. They traded their horses for different mounts at isolated ranches where Flynn had friends, further confusing any pursuit. When they finally reached Nebraska territory, they adopted disguises: Flynn as a traveling preacher, Olivia as his devoted wife, and purchased passage on a riverboat heading toward St. Louis. The closer they got to civilization, the more they relaxed their vigilance, though never completely. By the time they reached Chicago, they felt secure enough to board a train for the final leg to New York City, arriving in early autumn as the leaves were beginning to turn. New York overwhelmed Olivia with its scale and energy. Having spent her life in the relatively sparse settlements of the West, the teeming metropolis seemed like another world entirely. Flynn, with his Boston upbringing, navigated the urban landscape with greater ease, leading them to a modest hotel where they could rest before approaching the Tribune offices. Horace Greeley, the paper's legendary editor, proved more accessible than they had dared hope. Flynn's status as a U.S. Marshal, albeit a suspended one, granted them an audience the very day they arrived at the Tribune building. Greeley listened intently as they presented their evidence, his shrewd eyes missing nothing as he examined the ledgers and witness statements they had brought from Wyoming. "This is precisely the sort of corporate villainy the Tribune exists to expose," he declared when they had finished. "Mining companies have been exploiting workers and resources with impunity for too long. Your Harrison Blackstone sounds like a particularly egregious example." "He's dangerous," Flynn warned. "He's already managed to undermine a federal investigation and judicial proceeding." "All the more reason to publish," Greeley replied with the confidence of a man accustomed to powerful enemies. "I'll assign our best investigative reporter to work with you on shaping this into a series of articles. We'll need to verify everything independently, of course, but if it all holds up, and I believe it will begin publication within the week." True to his word, Greeley set the Tribune's machinery in motion. For the next several days, Flynn and Olivia worked closely with Samuel Clemens, a rising star among the paper's contributors who wrote under the name Mark Twain. His incisive questions and narrative skills transformed their evidence into a compelling story of corporate greed and human suffering. The first installment appeared on the Tribune's front page on October 12, 1876, under the headline, "Death for Profit: How Blackstone Minerals Sacrifices Lives for Gold." The article detailed the company's pattern of safety violations, illustrated with excerpts from their own internal documents and heart-wrenching accounts from families of deceased miners. Subsequent articles appeared daily, each more damning than the last. By the third day, other New York papers had picked up the story. By the fifth, telegrams arrived informing them that newspapers in Chicago, St. Louis, and even Cheyenne were reprinting the exposés. On the seventh day, as they sat in Greeley's office reviewing the impact of their campaign, a telegram arrived from Judge Carleton in Cheyenne. "Blackstone stock plummeting, stop investors demanding investigation, stop federal authorities from Washington arriving tomorrow, stop safe to return, stop charges against Jameson dropped, stop Flynn read the message aloud, his voice thick with emotion. "We did it," he said softly, looking at Olivia with wonder. "We actually did it." "You did it," Greeley corrected, gesturing to both of them. "The Tribune merely provided the platform. Your courage in bringing this evidence forward despite the personal risks is what made this possible." Later, as they walked through Central Park celebrating their victory, Flynn turned to Olivia with a serious expression. "There's something we need to discuss," he said, guiding her to a bench beneath a magnificent oak tree. "Your past activities, the robberies." Olivia's stomach tightened. She'd known this conversation was inevitable, but had hoped to postpone it a while longer. "The gold has been returned," she said quietly. "All of it that wasn't used for the women and children. I know." Flynn took her hands in his. "And I've been thinking about how to address the legal implications of what you did. Am I going to prison after all?" Her voice was steady, though her heart raced. "No." Flynn's answer was immediate, definitive. "I've spoken with Judge Carleton by telegraph. In light of your instrumental role in exposing Blackstone's crimes, and considering the circumstances that drove you to take the actions you did, he's prepared to offer you complete immunity." Olivia stared at him in disbelief. "Immunity, just like that?" "Not just like that. There are conditions." Flynn squeezed her hands gently. "You'll need to make a full statement about each robbery, providing details that might help prevent similar crimes in the future, and you'll need to commit to a lawful life going forward." "Of course," she agreed readily. "I never wanted to be a thief, Flynn. I only did what seemed necessary at the time. I know that now." His blue eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Which brings me to my next question, and it's an important one." Flynn slid from the bench to one knee before her, still holding her hands. From his pocket, he produced a simple gold ring. "Olivia Parker, I have loved you since that night in your cabin when you showed me what true justice looks like. I love your courage, your determination, your compassion for those who need protection." His voice was steady, though emotion made his eyes shine. "I want to build a life with you, one where neither of us has to choose between the law and what's right. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred Olivia's vision as she looked down at this man, who had changed everything, the lawman who had chosen justice over rules, who had seen the woman behind the thief and loved her anyway. "Yes," she whispered, then louder with growing certainty. "Yes, Flynn Jameson, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger before rising to kiss her, a tender promise of their shared future. Around them, autumn leaves drifted lazily to the ground as New Yorkers passed by, unaware that they were witnessing the culmination of a most unlikely love story that had begun in the wild frontier of Wyoming territory. They were married 2 weeks later in a small church in Cheyenne, with Judge Carlton officiating and several of the mining widows and their children in attendance. Martha Williams came too, her tearful apology accepted by Olivia with the understanding that desperate circumstances drive people to desperate choices. The settlement from Blackstone Minerals, negotiated as part of the federal investigation prompted by the Tribune articles, provided generous compensation to all families who had lost loved ones in the company's mines. For many, including Martha, it meant financial security and the chance for a fresh start. Flynn was not only reinstated as a U.S. Marshal but commended for his persistence in pursuing justice against formidable opposition. He was offered a promotion that would have taken him to Washington, but he declined, preferring to remain in Wyoming where he felt he could do the most good. Olivia used part of her settlement money to establish a proper school for the miners' children in Rawlins, ensuring they would have opportunities her own brother had been denied. She continued her seamstress work as well, finding joy in creating beautiful things after so many years focused solely on survival. 2 years later, as spring brought new life to the Wyoming plains, Olivia gave birth to their first child, a son they named James Carlton Jameson, in honor of the judge who had believed in their cause when all seemed lost. The following year brought a daughter, Margaret, whose auburn hair matched her mother's and whose determination matched her father's. On their 5th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch of their ranch house outside Rawlins watching their children play, Flynn wrapped an arm around Olivia's shoulders. "Any regrets?" he asked, his voice soft in the gathering twilight. Olivia leaned into his embrace, considering the question. "About returning the gold, about giving up being the ghost," she shook her head, smiling. "Not a single one." "Nor I," Flynn agreed, kissing her temple. "Though I must admit I occasionally miss the excitement of those early days together." Olivia laughed, turning to face him fully. "Our life is never going to be ordinary, Flynn Jameson. Not with our history, not with the work we continue to do." For they had indeed found ways to work together, combining Flynn's legal authority with Olivia's insight into the challenges faced by the territory's most vulnerable citizens. "No," he conceded with a smile, "not ordinary at all. Extraordinary, I'd say." As the sun set over the Wyoming landscape, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and golds, Olivia reflected on the strange journey that had brought her here. From a desperate young woman hiding stolen gold beneath her floorboards to a respected community member with a loving family and purpose beyond mere survival. The gold was gone, returned to its rightful owners. But what she had gained in its place, love, family, purpose, redemption, was a fortune beyond price, one that no thief could ever steal and no hardship could diminish. And that, Olivia Parker Jameson decided as she kissed her husband beneath the vast Wyoming sky was the greatest treasure of all.